do our opening affirmation, repeating with me. There is only one presence, one power, active as my life, and as the Ghost, God the Omnipotent. Amen. And now our opening affirmation song, Surely the Presence.
Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. I can feel God's mighty power and His grace. I can hear the rush of angels' wings. I see glory on each face. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. I can feel God's mighty power and His grace. I can hear the rush of angels' wings. I see glory on each face. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place.
And now I would like to invite our prayer chaplain, Martin Klattenoff, to join us to light the Christ candle and read the daily word.
Good morning, friends.
Good morning.
The Christ candle represents the divine spark which indwells each of us in equal measure. It is our connection with the divine and with one another, and is the power by which we live, move, and have our being. The thought for today is in the moment. I am grateful for the gifts within each moment. Every moment exudes infinite possibility, and I am grateful for the gifts each moment offers in my life today. Still, it is not always easy to remember the power of possibilities that lie within every moment as distractions claim my attention. Retreating from the external by turning within, I center my awareness in God and my divine identity. I anchor myself in the now moment, appreciative of its power and open to its gifts. It is by turning into this moment that I feel the light and love of infinite spirit. Acknowledging that the source of all I need is within and all around me, I relax into the peace of each powerful moment. I joyfully affirm, I am grateful for the gifts within each moment. And from the book of Corinthians, chapter 2, verse 6 and 2. See, now is the acceptable time. See, now is the day of salvation.
And please join me now for singing of the Lord's Prayer.
Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
And as we move into a place of infinite potential, I invite each one of you to journey with me outside in front of our church center. Think about how you're feeling. Think about why you're here. Think about the expectations as you walk through the door. But as you walk up the stairs, you see these beautiful canisters. And they each have a word written on them. Some say joy. Some say peace. Some say love. Others say humor. Some say new beginnings. And some have no word on it, to where you can choose a word of your own. So pick up a canister with the word that resonates with you. Inside these canisters are beautiful healing angel dust. And as you walk through the door, you now have the infinite possibility of spreading the healing dust with the word that you have chose. What would you do? Spray love on someone that you know is hurting? Would you share joy and spread it high so that the angel dust of joy can come down on each person? For someone that you know is not feeling well, would you spread healing? And as you look around and see the beautiful faces of each other, you know that it's a combination, because all the infinite possibility is within your very hands, all at the same moment. And how do you feel now, knowing that within these very walls there is unbelievable, infinite possibility? And that you are the creator of that. as you settle down into your seat, filled with love, joy, health, healing, you know that every time you walk through that door, this is your charge to bring in with you all that you are feeling in your hearts right now. So I invite you, as you return back to this very sacred place, and slowly and gently open your eyes. Remember what you're feeling and bring it with you every time you walk through these doors. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you my friend and my colleague for many, many years, Dr. Jim Lockard. Dr. Jim is a minister, a teacher, a speaker, an author, a blogger, a coach, a consultant of all New Thought leadership. Raised in Baltimore, Maryland, he is currently living in Lyon, France, and through this weekend of being with him, we have all learned much about the food, the country, and the wine, and we have had wonderful meals together doing that. He has been on the advisory board of the Association of Global New Thought since 2005. For 20 years, he's been a spiritual leader in California, Florida, and Maryland, and he's written his newest book, Created the Beloved Community, which is his title of his talk today. It's a handbook for spiritual leadership and then sacred thinking. His blog, New Thought Evolutionary, is popular in New Thought circles and beyond. He's a blogger for AGNT, and he served at the board of directors of International Centers for Spiritual Living 2003 to 2012. So I would like to, with a warm welcome, with my heart, saying thank you for being here and sharing with us, Dr. Jim Lockard.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Bonjour, I should say. Just a little, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I retired from active pulpit ministry, so to speak, in early 2015, and my ministry since then has been mainly writing and coaching, and I do teach private students. And I serve on a committee with Centers for Spiritual Living called the Spiritually Motivated Social Engagement Committee. And the role of that committee is to help with a cultural transformation in that organization of moving from, well, let's say rather than moving toward greater activity in the areas of social justice and community involvement. And that's partly what I want to talk about today. So let's, are we on? There we go. With the tragic shooting in Pittsburgh, the threatened bombings over the past week, the United States has seen both the greatest, most significant murder attempts on public officials, and the largest act of anti-Semitism in our nation's history. Langston Hughes, I think, says it well. I am so tired of waiting, aren't you, for the world to become good and beautiful and kind. So as we look at our role as New Thought students, as New Thought practitioners, as New Thought ministers, as New Thought people, and as citizens, how do we reconcile what our role is? For many years, New Thought has been, I've sort of envisioned New Thought folks sitting in a circle, learning about themselves, praying and supporting one another. And I think over the last couple of decades, there's been more of an energy of turning that circle to face outward and to engage with the larger community, to bring what we have to offer, which I think is a spiritual viewpoint that can serve all of humanity. Not that we have to convert anyone, but by being examples of the teachings that were so well developed by the founders of the various families of New Thought. Ernest Holmes and the Fillmores and Johnny Coleman and so many others, the Kramers and all the people that from about 1880 until about the middle of the 20th century developed and brought forth the idea of spiritual healing from a simple realization of what is already true. We don't have to be saved, we just have to know that we already are. And if the world isn't crying out for that kind of awareness, I don't know what's going on then. So my book, The Beloved Community, is something I put together based on some work I was doing with that committee and through my blog. And the idea of the beloved community is stated by Howard Thurman and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I think speak to what is called forth from us in terms of engaging with the world. And I think it has to include thoughts and prayers, but has to go beyond that. The founder of religious science, Dr. Ernest Holmes, once said, what you do is you pray for the poor and then you go feed them. That's how it works. If you pray for the poor and wait for someone else to feed them, you're not really doing it right. One time a man went to the doctor and he said, "Doctor, I'm just not feeling good." And the doctor said, "Well, let me examine you." And he examined the man and he noticed in this ear over here, he had a carrot. And in this ear over here, he had a cucumber. And he had a pea in one nostril and a lima bean in the other. And the doctor said, "I'm not sure what's wrong with you, but I can tell you one thing. You're not eating right." And sometimes we are starving for spiritual nourishment even though we know how to pray. Sometimes we look around at what's going on in the world around us and we feel helpless because we have forgotten our connection to a power that is infinite. This is a statement from the King Center in Atlanta, Georgia, speaking to this idea. He said, "Dr. King's beloved community is a global vision in which all people can share in the wealth of the earth. In the beloved community, poverty, hunger, and homelessness will not be tolerated because international standards of human decency will not allow it. Racism and all forms of discrimination, bigotry, and prejudice will be replaced by an all-inclusive spirit of sisterhood and brotherhood." I've never met anyone that disagrees with the intention of that statement. And I have never met anyone who agrees that it's been achieved. So where is the disconnect? What's missing? And I think we in New Thought are better prepared to answer the following question than many other people are. Because we know if we're waiting for others to act, we're missing the point. Dr. Howard Thurman said, "I know that the experiences of unity in human relations are more compelling than the concepts, the fears, and the prejudices which divide. Despite the tendency to feel my race superior, my nation the greatest nation, my faith the true faith, I must break down the boundaries of my exclusiveness until my sense of separateness is completely enveloped in a sense of friendship. Separateness arises from two things: ignorance and fear. We don't know the other, so we fear them. We don't know our own power, so we fear that which is different. Friendship, fellowship requires trust, requires connection, requires a willingness to some degree, at least, of vulnerability. And what we're seeing in these acts of violence, these acts of bigotry, these acts of cruelty that are unfolding around us, the world wide, is the result of fearful thinking. It's the result of a sense of disconnection from an inner power. It's a result of believing in false prophets, many disguised as cable news. And you might say, well, we know better, but we don't know what to do about it. What are we, this is Sheboygan. What are we supposed to do? This is a unity group in Sheboygan, one of so many different churches and other groups and all that. What is mine to do is the question. And I can't tell you what is yours to do. I can only tell you that you know what is yours to do. And perhaps you just haven't done the self-exploration to allow yourself to either discover it, or you've discovered what is yours to do and it scares the hell out of you. And you might say, who am I to do that? So finding that inner courage is part of a spiritual journey. Courage doesn't mean the absence of fear. Courage means you feel the fear and yet you stand up anyway. We always seem to have great admiration for courageous people, and yet we so often see them as the exception. This is from my book. I often quote myself. None of us is perfect. There will always be times when we fail to live up to high standards in any walk of life. In fact, such failures can be important steps on the pathway to fully realizing the spiritual teachings that we seek to learn more fully. If you're not making mistakes, you're not learning. If you're not falling down, you never need to know the strength it takes to get up. I mentioned yesterday, I said, I think the concept of comfort is overrated. We never grow from comfort. When you look back on your life and say, what were the most significant events in my life that caused me to realize something greater, something deeper? It's rarely that I was sitting on the sofa feeling so comfortable, surrounded by good food, and all the bills were paid. And I came to realize that I needed to change my life. No, it was probably out of some struggle, out of some betrayal, out of some illness, out of something. That you realized there was more to you than you knew. That you realized perhaps that you had a support system beyond yourself that you didn't know you had before. That people stepped up to help. Or people didn't step up to help and you realized you could do it anyway. We grow when we have a problem. Which is not to say let's go out and invite a bunch of problems in. But perhaps let's take on something that scares us just a little bit. Let's pick up the phone and call our congressperson, or pick up the phone and call the mayor, or go to a homeless shelter and see if you can help. maybe just disagree with someone who is speaking in hateful terms and disagree out loud. Thousands and thousands of such acts change the world. Every time. How do we create the beloved community right here? See, I would say my ministry in large part as I go around and speak and work with leadership teams is to recognize that this idea of the universal beloved community that Dr. King and Howard Thurman have spoken and written about must be supported at the local level by spiritual communities that come into alignment with it. And the way we come into alignment with that bigger idea is to have an overarching goal of some kind that calls us forth so that we're not spending all of our energy on organizational survival. Thriving organizations survive as a secondary effort. The bills get paid because people are engaged and excited about something big. Internal disagreements fall away because you're doing something important. And I've come to believe that teaching one another the principles of New Thought are insufficient. They're necessary, but insufficient. If all our churches are centers where we learn principles that were laid down over the years, and we don't do anything to coordinate anything beyond that, we stagnate. The seats aren't filled. But I want you to just look at an empty seat right now. Just pick one around you. There shouldn't be too hard to find one. And just think for a moment and feel for a moment, when you look at an empty seat here, what do you think of? What does it feel like? And I want to suggest to you that you think of it and feel it as pure potential. Because anyone could come in and take that seat. Anyone who is ready to be transformed or is ready to add to this community in powerful and positive ways. If you didn't have any empty seats, you'd have a problem. But if you have empty seats, you have opportunities to invite people that you might meet that you think are interesting people that might find value in what's here. Not as a need to fill something up, but as an offering to share in something that you see value in. I had my training in my initial years in the Fort Lauderdale Church of Centers for Spiritual Living. Back then it was called the Science of Mind Center of Fort Lauderdale. And the teacher there was a guy named Bill Tolliver. And he was fairly outrageous in a number of ways, some of them positive and some of them not. But every year he did what he called his dollar talk. And he said, I want to speak to the people that are giving $1 a week. And you'd be rustling. And here's what he would say. He would say basically something like this. He'd say two things. If that's all you can give, if that's all you can afford, thank you so much. And please see me for counseling on prosperity. But if that's what you're giving because that's the value you receive here, please love yourself enough to go someplace else where you will find greater value. Let's see. And people would go. And they'd take out a second dollar. But see, the point of it was, are you getting value? And if you're not, what are you doing here? And, we used to have, it was a big center. We had about 1,000 members, and the counting team would be in the back, and they'd go through all the, back then, most people gave cash. And they'd leave the ones for last, because the 20s and the 10s and the 50s were all like nice, and the dollars were all wadded up, and they were moist, because they were held in fearful hands. That was a communication of something, of people in pain. And if you don't address it, the pain remains. And if there's that much pain in the congregation, how are we going to contribute to the beloved community? We have to thrive to contribute to the beloved community. It doesn't mean you have to be wealthy. It means you have to be comfortable in your own skin, including your financial skin. Because if we're experiencing and feeling lack and limitation, if we're saying we're not enough, how can we go out and have enough to spill over onto others? Because if you're going to be engaged with the world around you, you need to show up empowered and ready. Because if you show up diminished and weak, you will do more harm than good. Look at social media and how people talk to each other, as if that's going to change someone's mind. Don't you realize what an idiot you are? I'm cleaning up the language. You know? Are we thriving? Am I thriving? The best way to contribute to a spiritual community is to be a thriving individual, which means that your life is working, which means that you're doing your daily practice in a serious and significant way. Your life looks just like your daily practice. That's one of our guarantees. Have you had Edwina Gaines here ever? She's a Unity minister that has been serving since the earth cooled. And all she does, her whole ministry is prosperity. And she comes in, and she doesn't do it anymore because she's elderly, but when she was a little younger, she would come in and do the Sunday talk and a workshop, and then she'd stay all week for counseling on prosperity. And she would not see you unless you were already a tither. Because she'd say, I would have nothing to offer you if you're not. I used to have a practice in my community. I would not counsel anyone that was not enrolled in class. Because if you were enrolled in class, you probably wouldn't need my counseling. See? Are you on the program or not? Are you a New Thought student or not? People say to me and my wife, you know, we live a pretty good life. Mostly from her income, not mostly from mine. How do you do that? I said, well, we're both practitioners of the science of mind, and we do our daily practice every day. No, really, how do you do it? We're both practitioners of the science of mind, and we do our daily practice every day. We have come to learn to expect a good life. No, really. See? Because what I'm telling them is something they could do. And they don't want to hear that. They want to justify why they're not doing it. One of our great teachers in religious science, Raymond Charles Barker, was at the New York church for many, many, many years. And there was a story of a woman coming in to see him for counseling. And she said, laid out her sad story. And he said, okay, I want you to do prayer every day for 30 minutes. And she said, no, you don't understand. I have big problems. He said, ma'am, do you want to heal your problem or justify it? Any energy we spend justifying our problems is adding to them. That's just the way it is. I didn't make that up. You know, had I created the universe, none of this would be happening. So what does thriving look like? At a community level, a community that is engaged with one another, engaged with what's going on in the larger community. There's an opioid crisis affecting this area, I understand. That might be something to get involved in. And you are, good. I hope everyone is. See, another thing that happens in spiritual community is you have a committee for outreach, and there's three ladies on it, and they do all the outreach, and you say, well, we're doing a lot of outreach here. A community where people are passionate. Passionate, passion is automatic when you're doing something you love. You can't help but be passionate. And if there's no passion in your life, it's because you haven't found what you love and you're not doing it. You don't get passionate about justifying your problems. Another longtime minister, Dr. Tom Costa, used to talk about he was going to sell in his bookstore a martyr kit. So that when you told someone how bad your life was, it would be a piece of Velcro here and a piece of Velcro here. Nobody knows the troubles I've seen. You know? A community where mission is primary and where organizational maintenance is secondary. You've probably been around a place that's really thriving in some form. It could be a business, it could be a nonprofit, it could be, you know, an organization of some kind. And it's like nobody's paying any attention to whether the bills get paid or not, at least in terms of a major topic of conversation. They're talking about their mission. They're talking about engagement. They're talking about the passion that they have towards some overarching vision that is driving all of them, and the rest of the stuff gets taken care of because people start showing up. It becomes a magnet. Success doesn't happen because people put more money in the basket. People put more money in the basket because they want to be around something successful. A community where people are affirmed and accepted. This can be a tough one. We talked yesterday about different kinds of diversity, not just by race or by ethnicity or by gender, but by the way that people think, by the values they hold. Is it easy for a newcomer to be accepted here if they're a little odd? I don't know. I can't answer that. Even if they don't want to be hugged. Even if they're skeptical. Maybe they don't smell so good. See, we're either welcoming and inclusive or we aren't. There aren't really degrees of that. And diversity is one thing. Diversity is where you have a variety of people. Inclusion is where they're engaged in the process. And I would suspect that this kind of area, because I was a minister in Simi Valley, California, which is 93% white, 5% Indian from India, and 2% other. And the other, which is Hispanic and African American, constitutes about 40% of the California population. Simi Valley is where they held the trial for the Rodney King officers and ended up with somehow an all-white jury. So diversity in Simi Valley was a little different than diversity in Los Angeles or diversity in Bakersfield or places like that. And we had to work to bring in different types of people, different people with different backgrounds and have them feel welcome. And now they have an African American minister there who replaced me. In a place where there are hardly any African American. We had to import them. See? But it can be done. And most importantly, a community where people are expressing what I call the compassionate heart. I don't believe you can be compassionate until you've reached a level of development that allows you to truly accept yourself. Up to that point, you're capable of sympathy. And sympathy is better than apathy. But sympathy is kind of, I'm so sorry for you. And inside, I'm glad I'm not you. Right now, anyway. Compassion is, of course I'm you. Of course you're me. Of course I'm here for you. See? Without even having to figure out whether that's a good thing to do or not. The compassionate heart cannot sit still when suffering exists. And we don't go to the side of many of our Christian brethren who say if one person is suffering, we should all be suffering, because then I never would have moved to France. We recognize that suffering will continue to exist, but if suffering is in our presence, it is ours to deal with. To do what we can, and maybe we can't do anything. Maybe we can just be a presence. I knew a nun, Catholic nun some years ago, who would say, I try to be so prayed up that when I walk down the street, people are healed just by walking past me. And you've been in the presence of people like that. You've felt their energy. And you think, I could never be like that. Well, you already are, you just haven't realized it. That's the whole essence of New Thought. We don't have to add anything. You'll never be any more spiritual than you are already. But you will and can wake up to that truth more and more and more and more, because there is no end to it. It's an infinite. But we have to do the work. The work is daily practice. The work is forgiveness. The work is acceptance. The work is recognizing the truth of your being. And if you're suffering, you're not recognizing the truth of your being in that moment. Simple. This isn't rocket surgery. There couldn't be a simpler teaching. Spirit is infinite. You're part of an infinite. Can't escape it. You can't get outside of an infinite. Because if you have an infinite and something, you haven't got an infinite. So you are within the infinite automatically. And to the degree we come to realize that and realize that and realize that, we become more and more and more available to serve. Because we're not spending all of our energy on self-preservation. And as a community, we're not spending all of our energy on organizational survival. And it's simply a matter of realization. What is already so. We admire Jesus, we admire Buddha, we admire fill in the blank, and they got nothing on any of us accept their own level of realization. See, I see Jesus as the great example, not the great exception. These things I do, you shall do better. Know you not that you are God's? It's in Matthew. You never hear it. Doesn't go with the cross very well. But that was his teaching. So we get to decide who we're going to be. I just think this is sort of decided. It's taken the afternoon off, so maybe next slide. Can we do that? Dr. King said, our goal is to create a beloved community, and this will require a qualitative change in our souls as well as a quantitative change in our lives. And I think we would make that new thought language by saying a qualitative change in our understanding of our soul nature. Because our souls are fine, our souls are full, our souls are complete, our souls are infinite. But if we see ourselves as diminished, we need to change that thought, that belief. And if not now, when? And if not you, who? Thank you, and namaste.